My husband was not a man. I learned this on our wedding night when his shadow refused to follow him. I've carried this secret for 20 years. My children think their father died in an accident. The truth? He was never alive. I grew up in Umuchize, a village where the earth remembers every footstep and the trees hold grudges longer than men. The elders always warned us, Ekwelaka anyagi hu ihe aga efik walandugi. Do not let your eyes see what will stain your life forever. I never understood the weight of those words until the night I met Obina. It was during Iriji, the New Yam Festival. Drums shook the air, palm wine foamed in calabashes, and masquerades with raffia skirts danced in spirals. They carved wooden faces, staring without blinking. I was 17, and my family had nothing but debts and shame. My father's crops had failed for 3 seasons, and my mother's waist beads had been pawned to pay for Gary. That night, I slipped away from the festival noise to fetch water from the Udala stream. The moon was swollen and red, as if watching through a blood veil. And that's when I saw him, standing beneath the ancient Udala tree, dressed in a white wrapper that glowed without light. "Why do you walk alone at night, Nkemdilim?" he asked, his voice smooth, like palm oil poured into a wooden bowl. I didn't ask how he knew my name. In our village, spirits know names, the way rivers know stones. Something in his eyes held me still. They were deep, black, but not empty. They looked like the sky before a storm. He offered to carry my calabash. I refused. He smiled, and my refusal became meaningless. Somehow the calabash was already in his hand. We walked together in silence, the air thick with a scent like burning frankincense. That night I dreamed of the same man. Only in the dream we were in my father's compound and he was giving my parents gifts, bags of rice, kegs of palm oil, and gold bracelets for my mother. My father's eyes shone with a greed I had never seen before. The next morning, Obina came in the flesh. He spoke to my father as if they had known each other in another life. He offered bride price without haggling. My father said yes before my mother could breathe. It was too fast, too easy. But in the poverty of our house, suspicion was a luxury we could not afford. The wedding was set for the next market week. There were no courtship dances, no visits to his family's compound. The elders asked questions, but my father silenced them with kegs of palm wine and meat. On the wedding night, the moon hid behind thick clouds. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. Obina led me into the hut he had built near the edge of the forest, far from the village lights. Inside, there was only one oil lamp. Its flame trembled, even though the air was still. I watched him undress, and that's when I saw it. His body moved, but his shadow did not. It clung to the wall like it was nailed there, its head tilted, its arms twitching as if eager to break free. "Kim," he whispered, his voice now colder, heavier, "do not fear me." But the lamp sputtered, and for the first time I saw his true face. Not the handsome man from the festival, but something older, stretched, with eyes like hollow gourds and skin marked with spirals of ancient scars. My legs refused to move. My tongue stuck to my teeth. My mother's warning flashed in my head. "Noam, not every hand that gives is clean." Then from outside the wind rose, but it wasn't wind, it was whispers. 100 voices all calling my name, and then a knock at the door. Not one knock, 3, slow, final. I turned to Obina to ask who it was, but his mouth was no longer where it should be, and the whispers outside were now coming from inside my head. The knocking came again, 3 slow, deliberate strikes on the wooden door. Kabam, kabam, kabam. My heart beat in time with the sound. Each knock felt heavier than the last, as if the wood itself was bending under a weight I could not see. Obina's face, or what wore Obina's face, was watching me. His skin flickered between the man I knew and something else, a pale, cracked mask of flesh with dark seams running like roots beneath it. He didn't move to open the door. Instead, he leaned close to me, his breath cold against my ear. Do not answer, not tonight, not ever. The whispers outside had changed. They were no longer calling my name. They were singing a low, eerie chant, the kind that swells in the pit of your stomach before it reaches your ears. I didn't understand the words, but the rhythm was old, older than our village, older than the language itself. I stepped back, my heel brushed against the oil lamp, and the flame wavered. For a split second, the room was plunged into darkness, and in that darkness, something brushed past my leg. I froze. Obina's shadow, the one nailed to the wall, had moved. Not far, but enough for me to see its head tilt toward me like a hungry dog scenting blood. The knocking stopped. Then came a voice, deep, grainy, like stones grinding underwater. Nkemdilim, is he feeding you yet? I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. I didn't want to answer, but the voice felt like it had hooks in my ribs, pulling words toward my lips. Before I could speak, Obina slammed his palm against the door. Go back to the earth that spat you out, he roared. The silence that followed was worse than the knocking. Then, laughter. Not human laughter, high and low at the same time, twisting in the air like smoke. The ground beneath the hut shuddered, and I swore I heard fingernails scratching the floor from underneath. Obina turned to me, his face calm again, his smile too wide. They can't come in unless you invite them, he said softly. And you won't do that, will you, my wife? My wife. The words landed like stones in my stomach. I wanted to run, but something about his eyes pinned me to the spot. They weren't just looking at me, they were looking through me, past my bones into the very core of my spirit. That night, I didn't sleep. Obina lay beside me, breathing evenly, but his shadow paced along the wall like a caged beast. At dawn, I slipped out of the hut under the excuse of fetching water. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and palm fronds. I walked fast, my wrapper brushing against my ankles. When I reached the village path, I saw Eze Mo, the oldest man in Omuchize, a keeper of forbidden histories. His back was bent like a question mark, and his eyes were white with blindness, but somehow he always faced the right way when you approached. You have married death, he said, before I could greet him. My knees almost gave way. Ezzy, what do you mean? He tilted his head, listening to something I could not hear. There is no family of your husband's in this land is of the kind we bury without drums, the ones whose bodies are not bodies. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell him it was nonsense. But last night's shadow pacing along the wall was still fresh in my mind. Do you know the Udala tree by the stream? He asked. Yes. It is older than the village, older than the first yam planted here. Long ago, a man was buried under it for spilling the blood of his kin. His spirit was bound to serve the earth, but sometimes he finds ways to walk again. My mouth went dry. I remembered the white wrapper that glowed without light, the frankincense scent in the air, the way Obina already knew my name. Child, Ezemo said, when the dead love the living, they do not bring blessings, they bring hunger. Before I could ask more, he placed something in my hand, a small carved figurine of a woman with no eyes. Keep this by your bed, he said. It will not save you, but it will delay the mouth that comes to eat your breath. That night, I hid the figurine under my pillow. Obina came home late, his wrapper damp, his hands smelling faintly of earth. Were you digging? I asked. He smiled but didn't answer. When he lay down, I watched his chest rise and fall. The oil lamp burned steadily. I almost believed everything was fine. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound, not from outside, not from the floor, from inside the pillow where I had hidden the figurine. The sound grew louder, and then a whisper right next to my ear. You should not have married him. I flung the pillow across the room, but when it hit the wall, it didn't fall. It stuck there, as if invisible hands were holding it, and the carved figurine was smiling. I did not sleep after the pillow clung to the wall. The oil lamp's flame kept bending toward the door, as if something was breathing there. Obina slept, like a man without worry, but his shadow did not. It crouched in the far corner, long fingers dragging invisible lines across the mud floor. Sometimes it raised its head toward me, and I could swear I heard it chuckle. By the time the cock crowed, my mind was already set. I would follow him the next night. The following day, I pretended to be ill. I stayed in the hut listening to the distant sounds of the market, women haggling over plantains, children chasing goats, the metallic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Obina hovered over me at first, pressing his cool palm to my forehead. You should rest, he said, his tone gentle but with something watchful beneath it. I will, I lied. When night fell, he lit the lamp and kissed my forehead. Sleep, he murmured. I'll be back before the moon hides. I waited until his footsteps faded into the rustle of palm fronds. Then I slipped out, my bare feet silent against the damp earth. The moon was thin and sharp, like the blade of a cutlass. I kept my distance, hiding behind banana leaves and crouching when the path opened. Obina moved with unnatural speed, his white wrapper flowing like mist behind him. He wasn't heading toward the village, he was going deeper into the forest, toward the Udala tree. When we reached it, I stayed hidden behind a fallen Iroko trunk. The air around the tree was different, colder, heavier, and carried the smell of wet clay. Obina knelt before the tree's roots and began to dig with his bare hands. The soil parted too easily, as if it wanted to open for him. After a few moments, he pulled something out. My stomach tightened. It was a calabash, but not for drinking. This one was blackened with soot, and its surface was carved with symbols I didn't recognize. He placed it before him and began to hum. The sound was low at first, then grew into a chant that made the hairs on my arms stand. The ground around him trembled, and the tree's roots shifted like snakes waking from sleep. Then I saw the faces. They formed in the bark, half human, half warped, their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes rolled, and one of them looked straight at me. I nearly screamed. Obina poured something from the calabash onto the roots. The liquid was thick and dark, too dark to be water, too slow to be palm wine. The smell hit me, coppery and wrong. It was blood. The earth drank it greedily. The roots twisted upward, curling around Obina's arms like affectionate serpents. The faces in the bark whispered in a language that scraped against my skull. And then something began to crawl out from beneath the tree.